The retirement account protection system in America operates across four distinct legal layers. Most people are familiar with perhaps one of them. The one they think they understand doesn't actually cover what they believe it does. And the layer that does the heaviest lifting during genuine emergencies carries a hard ceiling. In certain cases, a ceiling that hasn't been adjusted since 1978. That is exactly what I want to examine today. There are more than $8.9 trillion sitting inside 401k plans right now. 70 million Americans, 715,000 plans, and the overwhelming majority of those people share a common mental framework that sounds something like this. My account is protected, it's federally insured, it's safe. That mental framework is incorrect in at least three specific, documented ways that nobody working inside the financial services industry has a meaningful incentive to correct. Because if you genuinely understood the gaps, you would start asking different questions, and different questions are bad for the fee structure. I want to walk you through precisely what the protection architecture of American retirement actually looks like. Not what the brochure says. Not what your HR representative mentioned during your first week on the job, but the actual legal infrastructure, the real limits, and the three specific scenarios where that protection quietly stops functioning. By the time we're done, you will carry a fundamentally different mental model, and that mental model is worth more than any single fund you will ever select. Here's the central metaphor I want you to carry through this entire video. Imagine you hired a personal bodyguard. Impressive individual, large official-looking badge. You feel completely secure. But then you actually read his employment contract and discover that his job description is remarkably narrow. He is only authorized to protect you from one specific category of threat. He doesn't work overnight. He doesn't cover your children. And if someone enters through the back door, that technically falls under a different department's jurisdiction. That is the retirement protection system. Multiple bodyguards, very narrow job descriptions, and nobody tells you which door they're not watching. Let me show you the first unguarded door. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you something the Supreme Court ruled on in 2014 that most people holding inherited IRAs have absolutely no awareness of. It is the financial equivalent of a trapdoor. But first, let me tell you about the bodyguard everyone assumes they already have. Most people mentally group SIPC and FDIC together. Same basic concept, right? Federal protection that keeps your money safe. FDIC ensures your bank deposits. SIPC protects your brokerage accounts. Both sound like government agencies. Both carry that authoritative acronym energy. The problem is that this mental grouping is almost entirely incorrect, and the differences between the two are precisely where most of the genuine exposure lives. Here is what SIPC actually is. The Securities Investor Protection Corporation is a nonprofit entity created by Congress. SIPC protects investment securities, but it operates as a private nonprofit corporation. It does not carry a government backstop. That is the first thing most people get completely wrong. It is not a federal agency. It is not backed by the Treasury Department. It is a private corporation funded by member broker-dealers that steps in under one very specific condition. SIPC only protects the custody function of the broker-dealer, which means that SIPC works to restore to customers their securities and cash that are present in their accounts at the moment the brokerage firm's liquidation begins. So SIPC is specifically and exclusively useful if your brokerage firm collapses and your assets disappear from custody. That is the single scenario it addresses. Your broker goes bankrupt. Your stocks vanish from your account. SIPC steps in. The ceiling on SIPC protection is $500,000, which includes a $250,000 limit specifically for cash. Now here's exactly where most people's mental framework falls completely apart. SIPC does not reimburse you for investments that have declined in value because of market price movements. Read that again carefully. The S&P drops 30%. Your 401k loses $200,000. SIPC does absolutely nothing. Zero. That is simply not what SIPC exists to do. While SIPC was created through an act of Congress, it is not a government agency or organization. Because of that, it carries no authority to investigate fraud or regulate questionable broker conduct and poor investment recommendations. You believe the risk to your retirement account is your brokerage declaring bankruptcy. That is an extraordinarily rare occurrence. The actual threats are market crashes, bad professional advice, hidden ongoing fees, or someone contacting your 401k provider while impersonating you. And SIPC covers precisely none of those situations. But there is a structural complication buried inside the SIPC rules that even financially informed people consistently miss. Here is the important detail. If you hold multiple accounts of the same type, otherwise described as accounts held in a similar capacity, those accounts don't each receive their own separate coverage limits when held at the same firm. Your assets across those accounts are subject to a single combined limit. So, if you have two traditional IRAs at the same brokerage, each worth $300,000 totaling $600,000, and your broker fails, you are covered for $500,000, not $600,000. You are out $100,000 through absolutely no fault of your own. If you hold an IRA and a standard brokerage account with a SIPC member firm, each of those accounts could potentially be covered up to the full limit independently. But if you held two traditional IRAs with the same member firm, those two accounts combined would fall under a single coverage ceiling of $500,000, even if your total assets across both traditional IRAs significantly exceed that amount. The solution is straightforward: spread accounts across different brokerage firms. But nobody explains this during account opening. The disclosure exists inside a document that the government actually mandates, yet only approximately 25% of retirement plan participants reported having read and understood it. There is something genuinely amusing, in a deeply disappointing way, about a system that legally requires transparency, while structurally ensuring that nobody actually reads the transparency documents. By the way, go ahead and subscribe if you're finding this valuable. Otherwise, the platform's algorithm may simply stop showing you this content. The second bodyguard with an extremely narrow job description is the one supposedly protecting your 401k from something that is growing faster than almost any other financial crime category. And this particular threat involves a phone call, a call center, and the most significant legal distinction you have probably never encountered. Stay with me, because this is where the protection architecture begins to resemble a stage set more than an actual structure. When account takeover strikes a 401k, the consumer protections that govern credit card fraud simply do not apply. That is the single most important sentence I could deliver in this entire video. When someone steals your credit card and makes unauthorized purchases, the Fair Credit Billing Act grants you a legally enforceable right to dispute those charges. When someone steals from your 401k, you have no equivalent federal statute protecting you. In February 2026, the Government Accountability Office instructed the U.S. Department of Labor to issue new guidance on retirement plan participant data security. The GAO cited 11 separate lawsuits filed between 2009 and 2024 under the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, the federal law governing private retirement plans. 11 lawsuits across 15 years, not because the cases lacked legitimacy, but because the law remained ambiguous about who bore responsibility. Here's a specific situation that was reported in the New York Times. A 76-year-old retired attorney lost $740,000 in 2024 after receiving a call from an individual claiming to be a federal fraud investigator. The caller persuaded him that his retirement accounts were under attack and guided him step by step through transferring the funds out himself. He genuinely believed he was assisting a federal investigation. A retired lawyer with 40 years of legal experience, $740,000 gone during a single phone conversation. And remarkably, that isn't even the most audacious case on record. An imposter stole $751,000 from a Colgate-Palmolive employee's 401k by calling the plan's record keeper and bypassing security using basic personal information. The imposter didn't hack any system. She didn't need to. She provided the employee's name, the last four digits of her social security number, her date of birth, and the mailing address on file with the record keeper. That was sufficient to clear the call center's security verification. Name, date of birth, last four digits of a social security number, information that has appeared in so many data breaches it has effectively become public knowledge. The FBI's April 2026 Internet Crime Report found that Americans aged 60 and older lost $7.7 billion to internet crime in 2025, representing a 59% increase from the prior year. Investment fraud accounted for $3.5 billion of those losses, making retirement age savers a primary target for online criminals. $7.7 billion in a single year from a single age demographic. And the legal framework protecting your 401k from this specific threat is still being worked out through litigation. Now, your record keeper may maintain a voluntary reimbursement policy. Many do, but voluntary is the critical word here. Your service providers, the record keeper managing your retirement account, and your brokerage services provider typically offer a guarantee that if you become a victim of cyber theft, the balance in your account will be restored. However, if the record keeper's internal investigation, which is based on the specific facts and circumstances of your particular case, determines that you compromised your own account by sharing your password or other credentials, the guarantee will not be honored. So whether your protection holds up depends entirely on the outcome of an internal investigation conducted by the very same company that failed to protect you, using criteria that company itself defines. That is not a guarantee. That is a claims process with a built-in justification for denying you. Let me introduce a character who will accompany us through the remainder of this video. Think of him as a composite, a person I'll call Mark. Mark is 52 years old. He has worked at 4 different companies throughout his career. He rolled over each 401k into an IRA when he departed each employer because every financial article he ever encountered told him that was the intelligent, flexible approach. Mark currently holds $650,000 in a traditional IRA at a single brokerage. He has no awareness of what he actually surrendered when he completed those rollovers. I'm going to return to Mark in roughly 2 minutes, and what happens to him will completely reshape how you think about the rollover decision. Here is something the mainstream retirement advice industry has been carefully avoiding for 2 decades, and it connects directly to Mark's circumstances. Before getting there, I want to tell you about a digital book I put together. Understanding the gaps in your protection system and actually constructing a financial architecture around that knowledge are 2 entirely different things. I had access to this research for years and it didn't change my own behavior until I built a systematic framework around it. The book is called The Exit Code. It is 8 chapters of analysis built on 50 years of actual retirement data. Not personal opinion, not vague principles, not an inspirational story about someone who retired at 40 on a sailboat. Research. The specific chapter that connects most directly to what we're examining in this video covers what I call the 58% rule, the statistical reality that a significant share of people exit the workforce earlier than planned due to health events, unexpected layoffs, or family circumstances, and whose retirement architecture was never designed to handle an early and involuntary departure. There is also a detailed breakdown of the dynamic withdrawal strategy that replaces the 4% rule, a rule that was formulated in 1994 using data that predates the modern interest rate environment and one that the original researcher himself later indicated he would not recommend without substantial modification. If you have ever looked at your retirement account balance and thought, okay, this is probably fine, without running it through a rigorous mathematical framework, that is the gap the exit code closes. You can access it for less than the cost of a dinner out through the link in the description. Every year you delay this mathematical exercise is a year that compounds against you. That isn't dramatic language. That is simply how compounding functions in reverse. Now back to the silent erosion that is occurring inside every single retirement account in America right now, whether the account holder is aware of it or not. A recent survey by the Government Accountability Office found that 40% of people do not fully understand 401k fees, while 41% are entirely unaware that they pay fees at all. 41%. More than 4 out of every 10 people with a 401k believe their account operates at no cost. It does not. Over a lifetime, fees can cost a median income two-earner household nearly $155,000 and consume close to one-third of their total investment returns. One-third of your investment returns quietly extracted, never appearing as a separate line item. You simply watch the number grow more slowly than it should and assume it must be the market underperforming. Here is the actual math. A worker who invests $100,000 with a 0.5% annual fee grows that account to approximately $574,000 after 30 years at a 7% return. Another worker invests the identical amount but pays 1.5% in annual fees. After 30 years, that account grows to only about $432,000. That is a $142,000 difference, funds lost entirely to fees. $142,000 on $100,000 invested. The fee didn't make the underlying investments perform worse. The fee simply quietly skimmed value away each year, and compound interest transformed that steady skim into a six-figure exit cost that nobody voted for. Now, here is the escalation that most people completely miss. Investors are projected to move an estimated $941 billion from employer-sponsored plans into IRAs this year alone. According to research firm Cerulli Associates, mutual fund fees can vary substantially between retail IRAs and employer-sponsored retirement plans, even for the exact same fund. This pricing gap has been quietly eroding retirement savings for years and is accelerating as baby boomers retire in growing numbers. The exact same fund, same name, same portfolio manager, same underlying holdings can carry a different expense ratio depending on whether it sits inside a group 401k plan or an individual IRA. The group plan receives the institutional share class pricing. Your IRA gets the retail rate. The difference is frequently between 20 and 40 basis points annually. Multiply that across 25 years of retirement withdrawals, and you have surrendered tens of thousands of dollars simply through the act of transitioning accounts. And among workers who plan to roll savings into an IRA, just 3% identified lower fees as their primary motivation. 3%. 3% of people executing the largest financial transaction of their working lives were thinking about the primary variable that would most directly determine their long-term outcome. This is not fundamentally a math problem. It is a psychology problem. We optimize for a sense of control because control feels like security, but control without accurate information is simply anxiety accompanied by additional paperwork. Now let me take you to the scenario where the protection gap is not theoretical at all. This is where I want to discuss Enron. Not because it represents ancient history, but because the structural vulnerability it exposed remains legally present inside your 401k today and has never actually been remedied. In 2001, Enron ranked as the 7th largest company in America. Its employees had accumulated their retirement savings inside the company's 401k plan. And here is the precise mechanism that made the outcome catastrophic. When Enron shares were trading near their highest valuations, approximately 2/3 of total 401k plan assets were concentrated in company stock. 2/3 of employees' retirement savings in a single stock. And because Enron was in the process of transitioning to a new outside administrator for its 401k plan, employees were locked out of their accounts for at least 2 weeks during an extraordinarily volatile period in the company's share price, rendering them completely unable to sell their Enron holdings as the value collapsed. At Enron, executives liquidated more than $1 billion of personal stock holdings, while Enron workers lost more than $1 billion from their 401k retirement plans. 25,000 employees lost their jobs. They forfeited $2 billion in pension savings and $1.2 billion in retirement funds. And the 401k plan was fully qualified. It carried all the protections that qualification provides. The problem is that those protections shield your assets from external creditors. they do not protect you from the assets themselves declining to zero. Compared to traditional defined benefit pension plans, 401k plans carry a level of risk that transforms retirement saving into something closer to speculative activity rather than a reliable source of financial security. Rather than a promised benefit backed by federal guarantee, 401k plans allow employees to make investment decisions that hold the potential for devastating losses. No law prohibited Enron from matching employee contributions with company stock. No law prevents your employer from doing the same thing today. The Pension Protection Act of 2006 made it somewhat easier to eventually diversify away from employer stock holdings, but it did not eliminate the underlying risk. You could be sitting inside a plan right now where 15% of your total balance is concentrated in a single company's equity, and that company is your employer. If they collapse, you lose your employment income and your retirement savings simultaneously. This is where the bodyguard metaphor lands most forcefully. The ERISA bodyguard protects your assets from external creditors. He provides no protection against what those assets choose to do entirely on their own. Now I need to return to Mark because Mark's situation is considerably more precarious than he realizes. Remember, Mark rolled over 4 separate 401ks into IRAs across his career. He now holds $650,000 in a traditional IRA. What Mark doesn't understand is that in completing those rollovers, he altered his legal protection profile in 3 distinct ways simultaneously. First, he moved from unlimited ERISA creditor protection to capped federal protection. Under current law, effective April 1st, 2025, the maximum aggregate federal bankruptcy exemption for IRAs and Roth IRAs is approximately $1,711,975 with the amount adjusted for inflation every 3 years. $1.7 million sounds substantial. Mark holds $650,000, so he clears that threshold comfortably. But here is what almost nobody discusses openly. If you are not filing for bankruptcy, the federal exemption does not automatically shield your IRA from creditors. Outside of a bankruptcy filing, IRAs are not covered by ERISA's anti-alienation provisions. This means that state law governs whether and to what degree creditors can reach IRA assets through civil lawsuits, court judgments, liens, or wage garnishments. Mark lives in California, and in California, a judge can apply what is called a means test to his IRA balance. If you are 45 years old with substantial non-retirement assets, a judge may determine that your IRA isn't genuinely necessary for your basic survival and permit creditors to access it. The protection is entirely discretionary. A judge can examine your complete financial picture and conclude that you have sufficient assets to live on without your IRA balance. California ranks among the least protective states for IRA assets. Texas and Florida offer considerably more generous protections. The degree of protection covering your retirement account depends in meaningful part on your zip code. That is the actual system at work. Now here's the moment of levity I promised you. Try explaining this at a dinner party. So my retirement is protected, except when I'm not in bankruptcy. And even when I am in bankruptcy, it varies by state. And even within my state, a judge gets to personally decide whether I actually need the money. That's great. Very reassuring. Very well protected. Yes, very protected indeed. Here is the detailed case study I want to walk through carefully. Suppose you are 50 years old. You have been disciplined for decades, saving consistently and contributing regularly. You have accumulated $500,000 in a traditional IRA rolled over from various previous employers, and $200,000 in your current employer's 401k. Here is what your protection architecture actually looks like in practice. The $200,000 sitting in the 401k carries unlimited ERISA protection from creditors, both inside and outside of bankruptcy proceedings. ERISA qualified retirement accounts receive unlimited bankruptcy protection. This category includes 401ks, 403bs, pension plans, and profit-sharing arrangements. That money is effectively untouchable by creditors as long as it remains inside the plan structure. That component of the system functions as designed. The $500,000 in the IRA is subject to capped federal protection of up to $1.7 million inside bankruptcy proceedings. Outside of bankruptcy, however, you fall under the jurisdiction of state law. If you reside in a creditor-protective state like Texas or Florida, you are likely adequately protected. If you live in California or another means test state, a creditor carrying a court judgment against you can potentially petition a judge to access those funds. Not a certainty, but a genuine possibility. Now here's the variable that absolutely nobody models for in standard retirement planning. What happens to that IRA when you pass away and transfer it to your adult child? Because this is the element that changes everything. And it changed unanimously in 2014, when all 9 Supreme Court justices reached an agreement they almost never reach. In a landmark unanimous ruling handed down on June 12, 2014, the United States Supreme Court held that inherited IRAs are not retirement funds. This ruling carries profound implications for you and your family, because it means you must take deliberate action to ensure your retirement assets remain protected when they transfer to the next generation, and potentially even to your surviving spouse. The case was Clark versus Ramaker. It involved a Wisconsin couple who declared bankruptcy in 2010 and included in their bankruptcy filing a claim that the remaining approximately $300,000 balance of an inherited IRA, which Heidi had received from her mother Ruth back in 2001, should be shielded under the bankruptcy code provisions that protect retirement accounts of various types. The Supreme Court ruled definitively that funds held within an inherited IRA do not constitute retirement funds. As a result, they carry no protection as retirement assets and can be seized to satisfy outstanding debts. The court offered 3 specific justifications for this conclusion. The holder of an inherited IRA is prohibited from contributing additional money into the account. The holder of an inherited IRA is required to make withdrawals from the account regardless of how distant they are from their own retirement age. And the holder of an inherited IRA may withdraw the entire account balance at any point and use those funds for any purpose whatsoever without incurring the standard 10% early withdrawal penalty. In other words, the court concluded that a genuine retirement fund represents money you have set aside and cannot easily access until retirement. An inherited IRA represents money you are legally permitted to spend tomorrow on literally anything you choose without any tax penalty. It carries the appearance of a retirement account, but does not function as one. Therefore, it receives 0 federal protection inside bankruptcy proceedings. You believe your protection transfers intact when you pass the account to your children. It does not. The bodyguard officially retires the moment you do. So here is Mark one final time. He spent 30 years systematically building a $650,000 IRA. He passes away. His daughter inherits it as an inherited IRA. His daughter goes through a divorce 5 years later. She accumulates debt. She faces a creditor judgment. The $650,000 her father spent his entire working life building carries 0 federal bankruptcy protection. State law governs exclusively, and whether state law provides adequate coverage depends entirely on where his daughter happens to be living, which Mark had no possible way of predicting 30 years earlier when he was making his initial contribution decisions.